recently been the California Climate Exchange. We call ourselves CCEX for short. And we're basically involved in the monetization of climate change. Sounds really different. Now, there's kind of a backstory to this. What happened is we've actually had a startup before in 2001, and we're one of the pioneers in the climate change sector. We're involved in some of the landmark projects, including like the first RED projects in the Amazon jungle, the first carbon survey for Indonesia. We've advised different governments from like Malaysia on biofuels policy to Kazakhstan. We did a lot in the sector, and we actually had a successful exit to AES, which is a listed U.S. power company. And I think you know, when you have an exit and you retire and move to San Diego, climate change was solved, everything is okay. Except it wasn't, right? Now, one of the things that you probably noticed is that there's a lot more things in the media nowadays about climate change and about people's interest in sustainability and so forth. And you can see it in terms of even just like the net zero mandate. Something like 90% of the global GDP is already covered by net zero mandates. And even the University of Michigan has its own pledge to achieve net zero. Now, how difficult is it going to be? That's a different question. But just to give you a sense of scale, already if in 2003, the volume of trading in the market in terms of carbon credits hit about $900 billion. So it's a large market already and has a potential for a lot more growth. Now, I talk about carbon credits because they're kind of like the metric by which you measure, let's say, things related to sustainability. One note of differentiation, though. When I talk about carbon credits, I'm talking about financial instruments in the global markets. And these are commodities just like you would think about, you know, financial futures, things like that. They're not necessarily what people in the U.S. think of as carbon credits, which are more like a policy-dependent instrument. So just a little note of difference. One of the reasons why I kind of came out of retirement, you know, aside from the fact that it was somewhat boring, was if you saw during COVID, there was a lot more interest in sustainability. People talked about, you know, how can we reach net zero and so forth. And that was good. There was a lot of interest in the field. But one of the things I saw was that some of the bad habits or maybe legacy problems in the market were creeping up again. And having experienced several, I would say, mass extinction events in the sector, then I was kind of concerned that we were heading in the same direction because the markets are rather dysfunctional, even though they seem quite large. And one of the reasons they're dysfunctional is because there's really no clear mechanism and marketplace for buyers and sellers to create a market for climate change, or let's say carbon credits. If you look at traditional exchanges as they exist right now in climate change, they suffer from several problems. And this kind of ties into the nature of carbon offsets themselves. Maybe you've heard in different kinds of media, stuff you hear sounds pretty scammy, and it probably is. Or it just doesn't make any sense. And one of the reasons it doesn't make sense is because you can't tell, like, how real is this? Does that forest even exist that I'm so-called protecting? Does the idea just sound pie in the sky? And a lot of it is. So how the markets have kind of evolved to deal with that problem is the markets have moved toward, let's say, a very rigorous checking of the type of credits. So that sounds good. But what that resulted in is, for example, if you had a project that was going to create carbon credits, then you would have to go through, let's say, a different kind of validation or audit process. You know, sounds very good, except it's going to cost you a minimum of $500,000 and will take a year. And if you're any kind of industrial company, you're thinking, that's a lot of money to have a hard pass on it. It also resulted in strange things like it actually discourages science and technology. Now, you would think that when people talk about renewables or sustainability, oh, I have this new, you know, there's a new technology, et cetera, et cetera. But the way the markets are structured, it discourages that kind of innovation because it's kind of like, do you have something innovative? Oh, great. We're going to have to do an extra audit of you. You could add on another $500,000 plus and another year. So if you're thinking about getting carbon credits, the last thing you want to do is experiment with new technology. There's also problems in terms of scale. When transaction costs are that high, smaller scale projects just are tossed out. I mean, who's going to do, for example, a project that's going to generate $100,000 in revenue if it's going to cost you, let's say, $500,000 plus. All these kind of problems made it so that there were very few transactions. And finally, it's the nature of the data itself. Imagine you're trying to buy a car and people told you, you can't see the car. You can't test ride it, but what I could do is I will give you a little piece of paper that has the writing specifications of the car from a year ago that someone else says that it's okay. So what these exchanges are right now are they're kind of, what these, oh, sorry, I'm having a problem with the microphone. So I'll just talk louder then. Oh.
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Okay, I thought I solved the problem by just talking louder, but maybe that's not the way. So one of the problems is the exchanges as they've evolved are pretty much bulletin boards with PDFs on them. No one's going to buy a car. No one's going to buy these carbon credits. This market is dysfunctional. The exchanges that do exist have very few bilateral trades, and it's not the solution. Now, what we do think works is the fact that there's more of an AI component because the technology has evolved to the point where you could solve some of the data problems. I know AI is something that's maybe, everybody talks about it, but it really does make sense in this sector. When you're talking about sustainability, one of the problems is there's a lot of dirty data, there's unstandardized data, and if you could just bring that data directly to potential buyers, then I don't have to rely on the PDF. On a bulletin board. I could see the car I could look under the hood. I could test the metrics. I could do different things with it. Oh, by the way, this is a prototype of our exchange that should be launching the very first listing later on this quarter. And by having this kind of platform, then you'll be able to capture at very low transaction costs, smaller projects with technological innovation, and again, something where potential buyers can go directly into data that may fit whatever criteria they would have. So this is the solution that we thought should be where the market is. And this is just kind of an example of where we're looking at. We have people who could generate data. Bioassets is a project in Brazil that is already producing carbon credits under existing methodologies. Make Census is something where there's more of an innovative science. Actual is a sustainability AI company based in San Francisco that's been working with us in terms of building the backbone structure for this. And at the end of the day, it's important for us to control the data. Now, what we do is we are kind of helping to create the market, one, in terms of the exchange itself, but two, because we have kind of a historical legacy in terms of having been in the sector a long time, we actually have our own projects that we've been developing and working with various parties. So we were able to get speed pretty quickly. We have projects right now, not only in the US, but in the Philippines, Thailand, Uzbekistan, and Qatar. I know they sound like diverse geographies, but they're actually not. I'm actually in the picture on the right-hand side in the blue, so that's the project we have in the Philippines. Okay. This kind of ties into our revenue model. There's three ways that we see ourselves profiting from this. First is the exchange fees themselves, which you could imagine if you have the exchange and you charge people for transactions on it. The second is the projects that we're working on ourselves. What we do is we charge a fee in terms of a portion of the credits generated. And that's important because then that gives us kind of like our own proprietary portfolio of credits. And that allows us to do what I think is the most interesting is, again, since these are financial instruments, if we have our own portfolio of the instruments, then you could do other things with it. You could create derivatives that'll provide price stabilization. You could provide, for example, insurance products that are based not on dollars per se, but on other credits. There's a whole universe of things where you could get involved in this sector, and that's where I think the exchange is. Okay, we had to put this in because everybody puts in a competitive assessment thing, but I think the important thing I just want to mention here is that the way the industry has evolved, a lot of companies are either on the pure consultancy side, where they help you write the 1,000-page application, or on the side where they kind of sit with the little exchange and no one comes to do a transaction with them. And what we're trying to do is say that it's better to have an integrated, vertically integrated solution approach for this. This is the typical team page. I just want to kind of point out that there's a bunch of us related to Michigan. I'm originally from Chicago, but I went to the law school here. Danny is in C's, and the head of our Singapore office is actually from the engineering school. I hope that this was, I know I talked really fast and covered a lot of material, but the important thing I wanted to kind of get across here is that climate change is not a horsehair shirt that you have to think that, I'm doing this because it's good for you. It's actually something where, if structured properly, you could do good for the environment and make money.